Welcome, everyone, to our session today. We are here with Marco and Kathy to explore the vision case, what they've been doing with S3 the last couple of years. And I'd like, before we start, because this is not just a session where you listen, I'd really like to involve you as much as possible. And the first way to do that is just to hear from a few of you. Why are you here? What is it about this session that means you made space in your agenda to be here today? So obviously, we're not going to hear from everybody, but if you could just jump in and share a few words, would be lovely to get a sense of who is here with us today.
I can start. My name is Jonas Eknadle. I'm here to learn and from your experience of all the people in this call and also meet you folks.
Hi, I'm Paul White. I'm just starting a social enterprise and looking at Sociocracy as being a way of managing the delivery of the solutions and the portfolio of services that we want to offer. So it's very much a not-for-profit, and it's about trying to engage people in the community and give them an active say in the solutions that we design and deliver back to the community. So I'm looking to learn more about how to actually apply it in practice.
Yeah, my name is Maartje. I'm joining, well, first of all, because Marco was my buddy during the course, so I was really curious to hear his story today. And second of all, I have my own company, so sometimes S3 is staying a bit theoretically, or I am the one person who is really enthusiastic and I'm still searching or trying to engage my clients in these ideas. And it's always good to hear, how it's working in practice, so I can take that into account when I'm talking to other people about it.
Okay, thanks, Martje.
Maybe I can chip in as well. Hi, everyone. And hi, Lily. We met 6 years ago in Stockholm when I was working for King, in case you remember. I got inspired back then. I've been thinking about S3 since, and now I have this opportunity to help an organization that had a really ambitious strategy for the organization in terms of no hierarchies and stuff like that. And I think I might need some new inspiration on how to support them best. So that's why I'm here. Super timely, by the way. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alex.
Oh, hi. I'm Ruud. I work for a small company called Trailblazers, and we are doing everything with S3, basically. We set the organization up around S3. And that works pretty fine. And what I'm mostly interested in today is the visualization and documentation aspect, because we're struggling with that a little bit sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Ruud. And Rafa, you wanted to say something?
We are at the company I work in Switzerland. We had 2 days ago a leadership workshop all day long, talking about why we are facing so much troubles. Taking decisions, and we are overloaded by meetings, but not moving forward in a way. We are stuck. And in the end of the day, we ended in the topic of domains, of the clarifying domains and responsible areas. And as long as this is not clear, what you can be. It was all about how can I be a leader if it's not clear what the domains are, and what do I stand for, and can I have like a decision if even if there is an agile structure in a company, can I still do like harsh decisions or not? And it's so much insecurity around here that it's beautiful. How it matches with the topic today. So I'm very interested in the role of leadership in this.
We definitely have something for you here today.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'd like to start to open up and just to share briefly about my intention. I think it was already mentioned by some of you. I want to open up the space for honest, genuine conversation between people doing their best to improve their organization using S3 patterns. I'd like to learn not only from what works and what's going well, but also what is not going so well, and then look together at how we can improve. This is obviously quite ambitious in an hour and a half session. So in our preparation for this session, we realized actually an hour and a half is not going to be enough to cover all the topics we said we would. So we actually divided up the topics into two parts. So today we're going to focus on the topic of leadership and S3 patterns around that. And we already scheduled a second part in 1 month from now, approximately. So if you would like to join that as well, you're super welcome. And last and not least, I'd like to say hi and welcome to Marco and Kathy. And if you could just tell us a little bit about you. Let's start with you, Kathy.
All right. Well, I'm Kathy. My full serious name is Catherine Kristen, but people tend to call me Kathy. And I'm an Agile coach at Vision, the Agile coach at Vision, mind you. And I've been working with Vision over the past year to get their organization reset up, to bring in S3 in a way that works, and to work closely with the teams. So besides that, I'm also a musician in my spare time. I play cello, and I really like role-playing games. So.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. And Kathy is next to a hospital or something. I'm not sure. Anyway, she has a doctor's appointment at 10:30. So she's going to be here just for the first hour, then run off. And then we're going to be here with Mark until the end of the session. So Marco, please tell us something about you.
Yeah, I'm Marco. I'm with Vision since 2016. I started initially as an engineer in IT, doing some network engineering and server stuff, and somehow I turned out to end up in the management team of Vision. We are a 4-people management team, the kind of top management at the moment in Vision, and I got the title COO for some reasons. I'm kind of the delegator of everything, or at least I represent that. And I think that's the perspective I want to give you today on what we think leadership means. And in my free time, it's basically a lot about family and firefighting. That's what I do. And obviously some computer gaming and other stuff. And I would call myself an S3 nerd. I wasn't very active in the community lately because of other priorities, but I really want to get back to that a little bit more.
Great, cool. Before you start your presentation, I just wanted to offer people a little bit of a framing in terms of what you've been doing with S3 so far. So if you could just briefly tell us how many people you are in the organization when you started with S3 patterns, and also to give us a sense of how spread these practices are in the organization.
Yeah, sure. I can start, and maybe Cassie can add a little bit on this. I think we started around 3 years ago. There's also the story about that in our presentation, so I will not cover this here, but we started with that. It was a lot of self-learning, and we pulled in one pattern after the other, and it was clearly consent decision-making, the principle of consent, and then we kind of added other things that we thought were needed to make that work. And that's basically also much of the story that we want to tell you today. So as you see on the Miro board, most of the stars are from us. It's kind of I wouldn't say it's the complete picture, but we use a lot of the patterns, not all the patterns in like the official way that S3 tries to teach us. And I think that's also the right way to do it. And there is things that we really use a lot, like daily. So yes, you see for yourself, and you will get the feelings throughout our presentation what we are really using a lot and trying to do with S3. And then there will be the second part in a month where we talk about all the rest, I guess.
So I think this is it for now in terms of framing. I'm going to take a back seat and let you guys tell us all about it. Then it's going to be around 20 minutes, maybe a bit more. And then we're going to stop, hear some questions, and then some reflections after that and a closing. So over to you.
So, we talk about the role of leadership in a self-managed organization, and more concretely about what self-managed actually means, because I think there is a lot of room for interpretation here. And we tell us our story. That's us. We already introduced ourselves, so just some pictures here. Then what you can expect today, as Lily already said, we will have that second part. So for today, it's really about that leadership story. And there is a lot of S3 things packed into it. We really want to focus on what we learned from this journey that we went through over the last years, and give you some conclusions that we made. Anything to add, Kathy?
No, I think the rest of it, so far as how we use S3 in Vision, objections and opinions, and a particular deep dive into documentation we're gonna get into on the 25th of November. The idea with today is just to give you an overview of how we of our leadership story, and also how our use of S3 in Vision.
So to give some context for the rest of the presentation, I think it can be helpful to understand what Vision does. This is not a sales or marketing slide, so don't worry. It's just, I think, interesting to know that we are an IT company. We are a managed service provider mainly, and we focus on running web applications anywhere in the cloud for our customers. And by web application, you can think of things like a web shop or a broker platform or something like that. And we do everything that's needed for that, from the Kubernetes platform, for example, or database services and everything. And we do this as a service 24/7. So we care that your application runs, basically. We are really a tech company. We started with engineers only, and we are currently around 50 people. I was the 11th one when I joined in 2016. Yeah. The rest, ask our sales if you want to know anything. Not the topic of today.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, but our leadership story is. So Vision was founded with the idea that there's no need for classic explicit leadership or leadership roles. We make the decisions as we go, and we make those decisions together. Very much about the people. And Vision itself was founded around a strong vision. So with a handful of people who started, and up to around 15 people in 2016, we were simply one team. We didn't document a vision or company identity or any goals. We didn't see that it was necessary. So our top management didn't have to decide very much. Vision's founders were part of the engineering teams themselves, or the engineering team itself. And they met daily, face to face, and it's pretty clear to everyone what we did, why we did it, and if not, we simply talked it out. Smaller decisions, often very technical architecture things, were decided ad hoc, and we went with a proposal or an idea until there was a noticeable reason not to. It became our cultural thing for us, with the saying "Mach mal." That's Swiss German for just do it. In the sense of, I don't see a reason not to, so let's do it until we find out otherwise. So even things like product pricing, we rolled the dice. And since we saw no reason not to work this way, we just went forward doing it. And we made bigger decisions in our weekly all hands company meeting. And we did this by seeking consensus. So, for example, to hire a new employee or define the salary level. And it worked really well with 15 people. The company meeting was also where we informed everybody about everything. We were aligned, and it felt like everyone was working toward the same thing. It really felt right. So our business grew, and we were able to hire one full-time person every month on average for the following few years. And we had different tech stacks, more customers, and our one team became too big. So we split it into two teams. And we didn't really invest time into defining what the two teams did. Everybody was connected with everyone, and so it worked. And our founders and senior employees were still part of the two teams. But over the years, it became increasingly difficult to follow common goals. And we made good business covering very different customer requirements. But what the teams did was more and more controlled by what the customers wanted. And we built what we could make. We fulfilled customer promises as we could, but we often didn't care at all if it served any higher common goal. Now, one day, because of customer work overruling everything, we couldn't wait any longer with building a new product we wanted to offer for quite some time. But when nobody magically found a way to make time for it, top management started a task force for it and asked some engineers to join it. People were not happy because people were used to making these big decisions together. And this was a huge decision, as people would be pulled out of their existing teams without asking teams. So we had violated our own agreement to make these decisions together. So to calm down the waves, management promised never to do this again and to find a way that we can make these big impact decisions together from now on efficiently. This is when we tried consent decision-making from S3. Though there was so much that we did not understand, and we failed badly. We made people unhappy. Long story short, we couldn't deliver the effective decisions on actions that we promised. We had some delegate circles and we tried to understand and consent to drivers, but ultimately we always struggled with the fact that no one seemed to care about some drivers. And sometimes we made an agreement, but no one followed up on it, implemented or reviewed it. And so we didn't know whether it was effective or not. So why was this happening? We thought, because no one is responsible. So let's make people responsible. So we defined more and more circles and work groups to do governance and to take action. And we thought, if we make the domains clear, then the domains will run themselves. People will know what to do and decide when needed. But it happened that people didn't seem to care about it. So we defined all these domains, roles, interest groups. But guess what? Our situation didn't really improve. But whether a driver was addressed or agreements implemented or not heavily depended on whether someone had a personal interest in the outcome or felt that we really needed it. So only when people personally thought that something was important, that's when proactive actions were taken. Now, people seem to unconsciously sort themselves into two types. Those who were often founders or senior engineers, understand vision's higher purpose and goals, even if they're not documented. They see what needs attention and proactively help us to get there. Others don't care that much. They just want to come to work and work. So the founders, the senior engineers, the founders and senior engineers and assertive voices really embodied the vision and identity and goals of vision, but the rest, not so much. So with the more domains and delegate circles, the proactive people were distributed around the organization and started working in different contexts and different problems. And when such people pull back from an engineering team, then the rest of the team tends not to see higher level organizational drivers or ignore them and start to focus more on daily business and operational work only. So people start to ask, why are we able to build the new product? Well, and why don't we have a process for thing X and thing Y? Why does nobody care that this is something that has already been a problem for years? Why aren't we doing anything about it? And what is it actually that we want to build and offer in the future? So this hurt. Nobody knows. So the company product vision was not clear. Strategic decisions that would steer what people do and produce at vision were missing. Even owners and management had different ideas of what we're doing. Domains seemed to be self-defined, and we didn't really delegate them. And therefore, we were also not reviewing them or holding people accountable to deliver. There was the assumption that the domains would just run themselves. So we miss leadership in most areas of vision. No one makes sure that we stay on top of what we're doing and decide what to do next and what's needed. So the owners and management of vision saw this unmet need as three organizational drivers: the unclear or not followed strategy, accountability, and missing leadership. So the management and owners formed a group with the goal to approach these three drivers and agree on what our vision is, what customers we target, what we offer, and what we offer to them. In short, our company identity. So understanding that we have a leadership and accountability issue as well, we selected a leader for this group. And it took about 2 months. So after 2 months, we managed to define and agree on our new identity. And after that, you can see in the example here, this is like our group work board. We did a lot of workshops. You can see the mirror scale is like greater than 1%. So we did customer segments. We filled out the domain canvas. We looked at strategic risk, et cetera. And we followed a general roadmap to guide us through those steps. It was not an easy journey, admittedly. But by doing so, we discovered really what our organizational identity was, and we came up with this. We documented the most crucial part of that identity in this organization canvas here. So, knowing what we want to produce, sell, and deliver, now we looked at our organization and our teams. We found out that our teams are not aligned with what we produce. So let's realign. We're defining and delegating new domains. So currently, that's what we're doing. We're setting up the new domains of vision, and the people have self-selected into these domains, and we're hiring to fill some needs. We're building the backlogs of new value stream teams. We're training particular roles with the S3 patterns and approach principles that they need to be effective. And in short, bringing clear leadership activities into every team at every scale. So that's the end of the story for now. The company identity is now clear. The product vision is getting clear enough to start working with. The clear strategic decisions that steer what people do and produce at vision, those now exist clearly. And management is learning how to be effective delegators. The domains are defined by the delegators and are actually delegated so that we can review them, we can hold people accountable to deliver. And people can hold themselves accountable too, because their domains are clearly defined and agreed upon by both delegator and delegatee. So leadership is developing in many areas of vision. And delegators and delegatees are starting to make sure that we stay on track and take decisions and do what is needed. Vision is like officially 100% S3 powered, right? Marco, could we say that?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, and for vision to identify and summarize and handle these three drivers, to define the vision, the company identity, and do the realignment, as a coach, I had to go outside of S3 in order to do it. So I used other systems and insights and tools to guide the organization via S3 to realignment. And we're going to go into this in much more depth in part 2 of our vision case study on the 25th of November. That's our story for now. And Marco, I turn it over to you.
I think the next part is still with you.
You're right. The next part is still with me. Okay. So we're going to take a look at what we learned, and particularly how this applies to leadership and self-management. So firstly, about delegation. So as an organization, as a business, you need to know your identity. You need to know what your business is, not only your own context, but also the environment outside of it. And you need to understand what is needed in order to fulfill your identity and achieve your business goals. And that sounds really, really simple and obvious. And you may be thinking, yeah, Kathy, we know this. This is so obvious. But doing this in practice is really, it means doing delegation well. To do this effectively, this sets up your organization to be able to have the kind of leadership that leads to real powerful action and change. So you might think about your organization as power that needs to somehow be distributed so that it's accounted for and the work gets done, right? So you can think about, we have a power cake on the delegator's plate. When you delegate, you cut out a piece of this cake and you give this piece, and you give this distinct piece to a domain to hold and to care for. So to delegate, so when you hand the pieces to people, that would be to a team or to a role, you're delegating them. So you know what you've dealt, so essentially in a phrase, delegation is about cutting out a piece of power for a group or individual to hold. And when you hand out that piece, you know what you've delegated so that you can review with them and you can learn and evolve and delegate the domain differently if useful. So you keep some of the cake. This is another note here. If you see our cake here, the delegator keeps some of the cake. They're still responsible for that part of the cake that they have. So domain delegation can be thought of in this 3 stages of a cycle. You define it, you review it, you evolve it. But in order for this to work, you need to follow these basic guidelines of domain delegation. And that was our learning about delegation. Self-directed versus self-managed. Marco, I'll pass the screen off to you here.
Yes. So to get a bit more concrete here, let me explain how we understand self-directed versus self-managed and what actually means. Basically on the free market, a business can be self-directed, meaning they can define on their own what they offer to their customers, what they do on the market. So they define what it is that they produce and deliver and sell and so on. Now, within an organization, it's a little bit a different story when teams or individuals would start to self-direct what they do. Then it's unlikely that they will effectively contribute to the overall purpose of that business. And we found ourselves in that situation, at least when we had this idea of our new identity and we looked at what we have and we saw that basically we're doing a lot of different things in our teams. And in our case, it was kind of special because we are a tech company and we try to do a more or less standardized managed service. And we were doing a lot of different things that were directly driven by customer need. And it felt like everything is going into kind of another direction, and we were essentially blocked from following on some higher level goals as a business. Now, on the other side, there is self-managed, and we understand this as the fact that the team exists only because you, for example, as the management, delegate the domain to them. The team does not exist for their own reasons. And once you delegate a piece of that bigger cake to the team, they know what their purpose is, and how they deliver on that purpose, that's totally up to them. So you can give as much autonomy as you want to that team, but they are still only semi-autonomous, because the what comes from the higher level purpose, from this chain of why or hierarchy of drivers or whatever we call it. The team cannot change what they provide, but they can be very free on how they do it. So this is, in our sense, that the idea or the difference between self-directed and self-managed. Now, vision is a bit special in this case. As you learned from the story, vision was started with the idea that kind of everyone is equal, and we find out what we do exactly together, and we made the big decisions together. And we really wanted to keep that. And with that strategy work group we started to define our new identity, we really stayed to that idea. And we made a consent decision what our new identity is. So everyone at Vision had multiple chances over months in weekly meetings and other asynchronous channels. And we did a lot so that people could contribute to what is overall what is. So anyone independent of team has a chance at Vision to influence what Vision does, what that cake is. But once you are a team and you got your piece of that cake, you got your purpose, and then you have to deliver on that. And you cannot on your own as a team decide what you do. But again, you're free in how you do things. And I think this understanding is kind of, it's obvious. It's something that happens in businesses and in organizations for decades. But from where we came as a company, I think we kind of maneuvered ourselves into that dead end where we found ourselves in this self-directed company at one point, or teams in this case. Now, all this delegation thing and chain of drivers or chain of purpose, that's great. But if we just delegate things to people, in the worst case, not much will happen. And we learned that the hard way. So let's go into a bit what we think leadership actually is. And after a lot of discussions and also some leadership trainings and so on, we kind of get to the point where we understand leadership as an activity. It's an act of being aware and seeing what is needed in any given moment or situation, and then insisting that need is addressed. And I want to especially emphasize here the word act and insisting. It's an active thing. It's not a passive thing. So you just don't sit around and wait for someone to ask you for a decision. It's about being proactive. And once you see something that you think is needed, you check with people and you insist that something happens. You do not accept that we just don't do anything. And to better understand this, I think a very tricky thing is understanding what need actually means. And there is the word organizational drivers or organizational need. And to understand what is an organizational need, it's crucial to see where it comes from. And this usually is the context you are in. So you have your domain that was delegated to you. You have your stakeholders. They want something from you. And there might be higher level objectives and obviously all the surrounding environment with legal constraints and policies and the market and whatever. So if you look at all of that, you have to decide and also prioritize what is relevant and urgent. And that is what ultimately tells you whether something is an organizational need in the sense of it serves that purpose of your domain or the purpose of your organization. And everything else, even if that might sound very harsh, is a waste of time. And that's really the tricky part to find it out. And this is part of leadership as we see it. Now, where leadership comes from is kind of another topic. We know that people act based on what they see, what they know, the current context they have. And in our case, we observed that people were basically busy all day with doing operational work, and they were deep into technical things and so on. And there was no one else in the team caring about things on another level. So it was very hard for them to find out why something is needed, how to make decisions based on what, and so on. And they, it was likely that things just got ignored, or even strange decisions were made. Now, there is not no leadership in a group. You might know this group dynamic thing with the alpha and omega and other implicit roles in a team or in a group. And this creates some form of leadership, usually when a person starts to lead because they think something is very important for them, and others might follow or not. But in practice, we observe that this leaves way too many things unaddressed, and mostly it's the important things that somehow count for the success of our business. That's why we looked into making leadership explicit. This is really a very current topic at Vision. And as we now know that leadership is an activity, we know that we can clarify that and we can delegate that to an individual. And with that, we create a role and make leadership explicit. Now, at the moment in this reteaming, we are thinking of two key roles here, and that's the product owner, as you know from Scrum, in a team that creates and delivers a product. So the product owners will care about what the team does in the scope of their domain, and the team facilitator or Scrum Master or team leader will care about how the team accounts for their domain. And then there is other things like I said, me being the delegator representative from management, so that in the management team, I really know that I'm the one who should lift that delegatee relationship, because otherwise it can happen that no one cares. Now, these things didn't work well at Vision, and we need to start somewhere. And it's easy to say that the team needs to care about their purpose and do everything they need to fulfill that. But this has to start somewhere. And this was not clear for a long time at Vision. And we now understand that this is really something that starts with the delegator, who makes the domain clear to the team, to the delegatees, and actively cares that they deliver. And if they don't, actively cares that we find out why. And if there are impediments, we find out how to remove impediments. We empower the team that they can do their job, that they can deliver. So it's about actively living that relationship. It's not defining a domain and then throwing it to a team and hoping that stuff magically happens. And the team then could further delegate some of their responsibility to a subdomain or things like that. And then this would basically repeat. Then they have to lift the delegate-to-delegatee relationship downwards, basically in that hierarchy of purpose. Now, a bit more on, and especially leadership in self-management. This is something that we really feared a long time at Vision. We somehow always tried to avoid the topic of making leadership explicit by placing a leader role in a team, because we thought this somehow will destroy the idea of self-management. But we started to understand that leadership is part of self-management. Leadership in general is what enables a team to be self-managed. And if there is no leadership, they won't be self-managed. Right? So it doesn't contradict it. And the idea and how we can understand this is that when you give a domain to a team, they can self-govern, so they can make their own decision that steers their behavior and future work and everything. And they self-organize their work. And they can even select the leader in that team. So it's really up to the team what they do. But without leadership, all these things might not happen at all. Then the other big fear is who decides if you put a leader in a team? The short answer is not the leader. But it's the leader that cares if no one else cares. And when we value the principle of consent, then we know that decisions shift to reasoned arguments. And it's not people in a specific position or rank that make the decision. And the problem with that is that if no one leads, decisions won't be taken at all. So the leader's job is really just to make sure that we decide when we talk about making decisions. It's about moving forward when there is a need. Then a little bit related to that is the fear that people will stop caring when you put a leader in a team. So if everyone is equal in the team, there is no special roles, everyone is an engineer, for example, then it's kind of obvious that everyone has to care, but often it also means that no one cares. Now, when you put a leader there, it could happen that everyone stops caring and only the leader cares. Now, this can happen, and we already saw that in the past in some cases. But ultimately, it's important here to understand that the accountability for the domain remains with the whole team. You can distribute any responsibility in the team to roles or like a scrum master and so on, but the overall accountability for what that team, that domain has to deliver to the organization, that stays with the whole team and not the leader. And the other way to look at this is that I, as the delegator, I delegate the domain to the team, not to the leader. And this is something that's a bit different, in my opinion, in more classic organizations where the accountabilities goes basically from leader to leader. And then you have the team lead that is also blamed when things go wrong in the team. And that's now Cassie's part. Thanks.
So in short, we learned that delegating and reviewing and evolving our domains is an act of leadership. And it takes active leadership to have direction in your organization. And writing the domain descriptions alone doesn't do much. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The domain description is like the water. Maybe it's the agreement, it's the opportunity, but if the horse drinks or not, that takes an act of leadership and seeing of the need on the part of the horse, right? So having leadership roles does not contradict self-management, and specifically, it does not contradict the principle of consent. So to distinguish between the drivers and organizational drivers is crucial. This is another thing, and the way of handling organizational drivers, well, getting the timing down, and really pulling them in for effective change, is an art that we very much saw a need for. And again, one that we'll talk about more in our presentation on the 25th of November. For now, a note about vision documentation. So we document our organization publicly. So all of our domains, teams, roles. So like what's going on with the current reorganization, what our teams do, what all the roles are. And if you'd like to have a look at that, you can check out this preview link for the deployment of our latest installment of the handbook. So, and for an in-depth tour of how Vision documents and visualizes our S3 and our important information in the organization, that'll be involved in the part 2 of our case study. So thank you very much for listening and joining. And now we'll take your questions, keeping in mind that I have 5 minutes before I need to run to a medical appointment, and then it will just be Marco.
Yes, thank you so much, folks. I'm totally looking forward to jump into the topic of leadership as well. I know, Kathy, you need to go.
Yes, I do. I think I'm gonna jump off now. Actually,
yeah.
And if you do have questions or comments for me, write me here on the S3 community or on LinkedIn. I would love to have conversations with you about what we've heard here and your experiences. So, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. So, first of all, just thank you for presenting your case, but also for just really being genuine and honest about where you are, what you learned, and so on. I think it takes courage to do that, and it takes strength. So, and this is a topic that, generally speaking, I've encountered many other organizations facing similar challenges. So there are overall like two fronts. One is the organization that is quite hierarchical and structured, that wants to move more towards including people and managing complexity together. And the other front is people or organizations that have started already with this idea of doing things together. And then there's a point where the scale becomes too high to sustain that, and you need to bring in more structure. So, and of course, every context is unique, right? So it doesn't mean that if you guys approach this in this way and got these results, this would be the same for every organization. I'm kind of naming the obvious, but there's so much about the culture of the organization, the history that influences how people will respond and interact with new things that are introduced to make some shift in the culture. So that's what I wanted to say. And I want to then open up for questions. And we have some questions in the Miro board. And I just like to kind of explore a bit the topic of leadership. So I see there are a few things related to that. So first of all, I don't know who addressed this, who added this question, and there's no name, but you mentioned about being proactive. So this seemed like the key thing that you wanted to emphasize in terms of what leadership means. So Reto, hi Reto, was asking, how do you define proactive people? Could you say a little bit more about that?
I mean, I think that there's no easy answer to that. It's people that care, and we know that we have such people. And I don't fully understand what makes those people, but it's a skill and it's a personality thing that I would say. But I think it can also be learned. And when you understand what you are there for, what your responsibility is, and you take the time to be aware and to see what's needed, and then you start to act. That's for me being proactive versus someone that just is part of the team, and when that person gets actively approached with an issue or problem and then starts to react. And we were a lot like that at Vision for quite some time, that we just cared about the things when they came up, when stuff went wrong, right? And there is so much we can be proactive about, but that needs people that have that attitude, I would say. But it's a difficult question for me.
Yes. So thank you, Marco. And there were some comments in the chat about leadership and some, let's say, added dimension to what you already presented. So I wonder if we could just open the space a little bit to hear some of those voices. So I think there was James, Timo, maybe Reto. Could you add your perspective on leadership now, since we are on that topic?
We were having a conversation here in the chat about that comment, no leadership means no direction. And I was pushing back on that to say that sometimes I see that people have, if there's no clarity around direction, so if the driver's not clear for a team, and or there's kind of people who are more or less hesitant around leading, then power kind of follows the path of least resistance. And so often someone or someones might influence the direction of the team, and others might prefer to be more influenced than to influence. So the other side of that coin can be where there's like a meeting of heads, and that can lead to disintegration of the relationships and the collaboration. And I've seen whole organizations come to an end because of that as well. So what's in the back of my mind, though, is the idea of clarifying the why clearly, so a clear driver for a team, and then introducing, for example, the principle of consent and having that opportunity for people to challenge the consensus reality or the current direction on the basis of arguments that show that how doing that is leading to consequences or exposure that would better be avoided, or risks, or that there are other ways to improve. So it's not so much about trying to get alignment. In fact, alignments can be a real problem in a team, but it's about creating an environment where people are free to pull and push against the current kind of consensus reality and direction that people are taking. And so by making power explicit and shifting supremacy from an individual or group to arguments that qualify as objections, then it enables you to much better harness the distributed intelligence of the team and leverage that distributed cognition engine to be able to make smarter decisions about which direction to go.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, James.
Thanks.
Was anything you, Timo or Reto, would like to add on this? Okay, I guess that's enough. I thought it's interesting to make the distinction between a leader or like a person in a role that includes some responsibilities around leading people or a team, versus the general topic of leadership, and this quality of leadership and how that is needed from everybody in the organization, especially when you are in a self-managed system, and that quality is required from a lot of people, not just those who are in that particular position to lead others. That was one thing.
Yeah.
And there was
that's maybe something I could jump in very quickly.
Yeah,
because that was also really about the discussion which is had in the chat, which is always very difficult for me because I cannot multitask at all. So, but I think as soon as you start speaking of a role of a leader, I just hear manager. That's something different. So I don't think there can really be a role of a leader, because either you inspire me or you do not inspire me, and I cannot elect you to inspire me. And if someone else elects you to inspire me, that will probably work out even less. But of course, you can manage me, which is probably difficult. You can try and help me manage my work. That's something different, and I like to make a distinction there. That was my contribution to that discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Timo. So how we define leadership and leader is important. So thanks for adding these dimensions. And Timo, you also had the question. Can you put a leader in a team? And if so, who can do that?
Yeah, that was actually the starting point for that brief conversation.
I mean, I could answer what we think we will do in that sense. I think I had it on a slide. Ultimately, it's the team deciding who they want to have in which role in the team. But we also see the need that the delegator gives some constraints about that. Not necessarily who leads in that team, but what we see as a problem is that I, as a delegator, for example, I cannot talk to 10 different teams of 5 to 9 people each when I want to just know something, how they are doing, where they hit the wall or whatever. So I want someone to talk to. And that's not necessarily a boss function or something. It can be just a role. So I can give as constraint that they need to provide a contact person in like the easiest sense, right? And if they now make that part of a leader role or not, that can be totally up to the team. And to add a little bit on your leader, I think it's a naming problem. If we call that person team lead, then things can happen that we don't want. If we would call that a scrum master or a team facilitator, then the world already looks different in that team. And if then they self-select someone into that role, that can even be much better. Or if they self-hire someone into that role. But it will be a mixture for us. I think we will give as a constraint that there needs to be a contact person and someone that leads specific topics if no one else does. But how they do it and who is in that role, I think that's up to the team.
Okay, so this is one driver that you see needs taken care of, the need to communicate with one person, not everybody. And so this could be one of the things that the team needs to take care of with a person in a role or in some other way. And the other, I think one of the other things you mentioned is about this more big picture perspective on the team, what's going on, and the organization. So the connection with the bigger picture of the organization. And because people are busy doing, creating the product, developing the products, then not everybody is interested in or has that wish to connect with the bigger picture. So I see a couple of hands. Let's hear from Paul is first. Okay, please, Paul.
I think, sorry, I just wondering if it's more about the specialisms that are required for the delivery. So using the term leadership, I think, which Marco sort of hinted was perhaps the wrong word. It's something we're focusing on, when in reality what we're looking for is different specialisms within the different requirements of how we facilitate the communications, the channeling of different information, the reporting on progress, the facilitating of how decisions are arrived at or how blocks are overcome. So I see very much, that utilization, for example, of the traditional Agile model in the context of delivery, of still having those specialist roles that you would be the defining points of how you get information on progress and how you have a team facilitated to overcome a particular challenge or issue or identify a risk and then manage that risk accordingly. So it's more, I think, trying to blend that language and perhaps shift away from the traditional terminology like leadership.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of different things that need to be taken care of in the team, and it requires special skills and things to do that. And whether the team puts that into one role or distributes that in the team, I think that should be up to the team. But we are at the point where most of these things kind of don't happen in at least some of the teams. So maybe they are good at doing their Scrum planning meeting and doing retros, but they really don't care about some other very important things. And we think if they don't find out how to care, it can help to give them some kind of constraints or more like a template or something on what could help them to successfully account for their domain. And how they do it, I mean, ultimately it's up to them, but what if they don't know? So someone needs to support and help them. And that could start with a defined leader role, maybe. But we are not there yet. We don't know. So we'll find out. But yeah, that's a very good point.
Okay, thank you, Marco. And let's hear from Hernan as well.
Sure. I have two questions. The first one is how the results of the company have changed with the implementation. And with the results, I mean profits and harmony. Maybe I like two results. How these results have changed. And this is one question. And another question is, how was the role of the customers to define the new driver of the company or the new drivers of the company? How was the role of the customers?
I will start with the second one first. We did quite some interviews with existing customers or potential customers on some new products we wanted to do in the future. And we had a lot of customer feedbacks on how our service is and so on. And that really went into defining that new identity and the products on the high level. But in detail, at least for some of our products, we are still in the midst of finding out what exactly we want to offer and also sometimes what the business plan is behind that product and so on. So we are at the point where we know the identity of vision, like products on the highest level, but not in every detail. And that brings me a bit to the second, or your first question, actually. At the moment, we are really in the midst of this, let's call it realignment. And we are not at the point where we can see a financial impact of this, like profit going up or the other way.
Okay, thank you, Marco. So let's take a few more questions. There was Adam, Rafa, and Roberto. One of you, if you could just jump in and then follow each other, like just take one, hear the answer, and go on for next.
Yep.
Adam.
I have like really a lot of questions, but I want to frame it in a way. So I'm more interested in your journey. So because I think, as you mentioned earlier, that every company has a different journey and there will be different difficulties. And I work in a company which is quite different. But I'm interested in your learning on. So what did you see? What was the seniority level of the people of the company when you started? And people who were hired were like, they really into this culture of like self-directedness, as you framed it. And also who became leaders. So if you have something like data-driven in your minds, explain this, or like how you see it. So what are the connections with who joined and who became leader, and were they like more senior who became leaders, or how do you see this?
The people who joined, I think that's an important point, and the people we have. I mean, we always invested quite some effort in recruiting, and when we hired people into trying to make clear what this culture is, we decide together. There is no management telling you what to do and so on. And I think we also made a lot of mistakes there, but ultimately we kind of managed for a long time to get people that are somewhat okay with being self-directed, what was our way of doing things back then. But I would say, especially in the last 2 years, maybe, we also got a lot of new people who really want clarity about things, who really want leadership, someone that makes sure that there is a decision in the team, that the team knows what to do next and so on. So it's changing, I would say. And this also creates a lot of conflict. So if one half of the people ask for more explicit leadership and clarity, and the others are totally okay with being somewhat self-managed and self-directed, with no clear goals and stuff, this creates conflicts. And this isn't easy to manage. Does that cover your question?
That's one thing. So who became the leaders? So were they the ones who
that's the other aspect. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there is kind of no one really wanting to be leader at the top, because there's also things like our salary system and so on, which is like completely transparent and the same for everyone. That's also something we communicate transparently. So it really needs people that want to lead, want to care, want to kind of see this bigger picture and stop being an engineer. And as long as people want to be an engineer, they don't run for a management position. So it's people that always kind of cared more than their operational work on one side. Also within the teams, there are kind of implicit leaders at the moment, the one who cares more about the technical thing, the one that cares more about the personal thing, and so on. It depends on currently, it really depends on who likes to do what. And this is not optimal. It's great that we have such people, but it also adds to the chaos, I would say, of not knowing who cares about what.
Okay, so thank you, Adam and Marco. So we have quite a few more questions, and I'd also really love to hear some reflections, some insights, the takeaways from the session. So let's see if we can manage to do both. So at this point, I'd like to invite a raise of hand or just jump in if you put a question there and you'd really love to have an answer by the end of the session. Rafa, please.
Yeah, I think my question in the end comes down to, I mean, it's beautiful if everything is defined, and that's a long way to get there, and you will never get there. But in the end, it's the leaders that are in the roles which experience the biggest change, and that's where we stand. For example, the marketing head of marketing, former we had, tried everything, and she was really exemplary, organizing her department, and the leader changed. Somebody came that worked for 6 years in a self-managed organization, and she had to realize it was nothing self-organized. It was just squares drawn in to converted in circles, and starting to live this, what you described beautifully, Marco, actively living the delegate-delegate-delegate relationship. So this causes a big change on the leader, on the understanding what a leader is. And I was wondering, where do you talk about that, about the person, about the changes you experience in a leader role and the challenges you face? Do you have something institutionalized? Do you have circles where you exchange about that, or are the leaders on their own, or how do you manage that personal process?
Very, very good question. I mean, I would say you also described that beautifully, that it needs that change in a person to become that kind of leader. And I would say I'm personally really in the early days of that change. And where do I get help, for example, or where do others in that should be in a similar leadership role, where would they get help? And I think we don't have something concretely like a interest group or what we have for other things. We don't have that at the moment. And there was a lot of us who took leadership courses externally, and we have also Cassie helping us with these kind of things a bit. So we get some kind of help, but I would say currently it's mostly learning by doing. And we will have this work group that basically, or let's say it's more like maybe a delegate circle or a learning group for all the kind of Scrum Master positions we plan to have. So they will work together also on how they be that kind of leader in, for example, the role of a Scrum Master. So that's the idea we have there. But this is also just starting, and we don't even know who will be in these roles from now on. So we are also trying to find people for that and so on. So this is an important point. I think it's something we should consider too. How can we support the ones who are going into these leadership positions explicitly or implicitly?
Great. Thank you, both of you. I'd like to use I'm aware there's more questions, and the session will officially close at 11 as promised. And I'm not sure if Marco is able to stay a little bit longer, but if he's not, then anyway, we can hang out.
I can stay a bit longer. So
great. So if you have, we can take a bit more questions and continue the conversation if you want to stay. I'd like to use these last 10 minutes to focus on some key takeaways, insights, reflections from this session. Okay. And the way we're going to do this is that you either jump in or raise your hand. Some people prefer to do that in Zoom, so we can just hear as many as possible. Takeaways, reflections, key insights from this conversation so far.
And jump. Okay, because there is something that I've been working with. I am consultant, so I help some companies, and this is something that I've been working with they show us at the beginning of the presentation is they say company and product visions unclear. This is what, and then the action was to meet with the team of the company to try to define this vision and product. And my reflection about that is that I have seen that the first one, and maybe the main one or the only one at the beginning that has to be clear about the product vision and the company vision, is the CEO. And then he can proceed to get his team, because if the CEO doesn't have this clear, I think all is messy. And so it's something that I have been working with, because the role of the CEO, I think, is very, very, but is core, is central here. So it's something that I have been living with the companies.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you, Hernan. Anyone else?
Yeah. So it's hard to frame it. It's but for me, was the learning is that different people work differently. They have different needs of management or directedness. And for me, because I'm already read Sociocracy actually from his side, so I'm learning it by doing it at my company, reading. So for me, it ties back things to the principles. So I the accountability, for instance, and also for the effectiveness. So there's always this question: is this effective, what we are doing? So is it something what is good? If it's not, then let's find a better way. And also accountability as in leadership. Maybe this person is just who is accountable, needs to answer questions from the delegator as a delegatee. For instance, maybe it's not the leader's goal, as we've heard. So for me, this is really this, that how people can live with the change, because it's for being the company better place to work at, not worse. Maybe losing something, but gaining something else.
Yeah. I think that question is what we do effective. The funny thing is, what if no one asks that question? And I think this is where leadership comes in one way or the other. At some point, someone needs to ask the question, and you need to bring the team to a point where they start digging into that question, right? And I think that's what we miss in a lot of situations.
Okay, and let's hear from Paul.
Yeah, so I think that's really key, actually. It's that context of the mission, and how do you continually, as you progress, checkpoint that you're still on mission, and who does that? Who facilitates that conversation to remind everybody that we started out on this journey with an aim, and we need to checkpoint and assure ourselves we still are on target to achieve that aim, even though the direction of travel might have changed because you've learned something along the way, or a change to the requirement potentially has come in. It's that process of continuously evolving, but making sure that evolution does remain aligned to the aim of where you want to get to. Obviously with Agile and context of iterative progress, we break that down into very much smaller chunks as much as we can, smaller timescales and delivery. So the risk is reduced in the context of a change in direction or a lost way. And checkpointing. So I think it's important to, I guess, be clear on how do you, at the outset of any sort of meeting, reappraise the direction that you're taking, and then use the course of the meeting to make sure that you are on that correct path, or if there needs to be adjustment, that a consensus is reached on the adjustment so that everybody feels that they're participating in that process. But it's all about delivery, really, isn't it? It's all about people signing up at the outset to the direction of travel you're taking, and then maintaining that course. And it's just a need to continually remind them that's what we're doing, so that people don't get lost along the way. That was a very simplified view, sorry. But
Yeah, thanks. I think that's right on point.
Okay, any other closing reflections, takeaways? Please, Jonathan.
Hi. I'm still processing that good definition of leadership that Marco offered us, and the idea of it being an act of being aware and seeing what is needed and insisting that the need is addressed. And I'm also thinking about the question of the role of the chief executive as well. Because when I first heard you say, Marco, that definition, I thought that could be quite dictatorial, not very democratic. But if I then combine it with your comment about caring, then it suddenly, I think, doesn't become something dictatorial, because if the CEO is effectively the sort of chief caring officer who really cares about the purpose, and the role of leadership is to allow that care to kind of flow through the organization in a way that's aligned, that really works for me. So I found that very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think for me to reflect on, I think I collect James quotes, as you know. So today's James quote is: "Leader is a strategy to respond to a driver." Actually found it very interesting, because the amount of times I've seen people constantly saying, "Oh, we need a person who does this, or a person who does that, or it needs a role." And even then it's even worse, because if I got €1 for every time people say this is a role and they mean function, actually job function, I'd be a rich guy. So, so what I think is interesting also in the insights for me is that, we tend to see leadership as a person, a single person. Whereas if you look at it a bit more subtly, it's where does leadership happen? If it's a group of people who can figure out the strategy for themselves, by all means do that. But sometimes the situation gets so complex, you want somebody dedicated to focus on it. And so the group handing that person and saying, okay, you decide. I think that's where sort of that nature of leadership happens. Also, with relationship to my own company, Xebia, I've been there when we were 35 people and now we're 4,000 people. So I've seen that journey. And in our case, it was always with our culture, it wasn't taking leadership, because we tend to all to do that. That's the people we are. It's about allowing others to lead. That's been our big issue. And so one big quote is you should allow your colleague to lead, because when that other person, we say, okay, you do it, you arrange it, then we should also shut up and then let that other person lead until that time that the other person takes over. So for me, I think in a nutshell, those are my big insights.
So one thing that wasn't mentioned so far, which is, a takeaway for me, or a reminder of the importance of not only describing domains, but reviewing and evolving them, and really making a conscious contract between the people who are delegating that domain and those who are receiving it. I think this is, a really useful thing to keep in mind. And I would like to see it more often. I think it solves a lot of problems. And we have 1 more minute. Let's hear, folks. Anyone else? Your takeaways, insight, or just any closing remark? So I guess not. Then I really would like to thank you, Marco and Kathy, for sharing this case. Looking forward for next month when we're going to look more specifically at how you brought S3, how learning happened, which patterns, and so on. So hope to see some of you next week as well. And the session is officially closed. And if you won't need to jump out, then bye. And whoever is here and wants to hang out for a little while, you're super welcome to. I'm going to keep the call open.
Yeah, I can also stay for a while. And thank you for having us, giving us this opportunity, and also the next one. It was very, very helpful for me as well. I got so much valuable feedback here. Lots to think about. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.